Welcome to We Are the People with Tracy Marks and Jorge Estamba, who ask you to know what's happening with your student loan. Tracy and Jorge keep a deep look at student loans in this country and the industries that surround it. Every week, We Are the People will bring you new insight into the corporate welfare industry, such as bailouts, and they connect with student loans. The show will highlight on your constitutional rights and how the current system is built to infringe upon them. Join the conversation by visiting our website chat room at wearethepeople.tv. Or call the show at 888-565-1470 and let us hear from you. And now, let's tune in to Tracy and Jorge for this week's discussion.
Surprise! I'm not Tracy, and I'm not Jorge. I'm Rick Strahl. I'm sitting in for both of them. Each of them has been called away tonight. So hopefully you'll bear with me. I want to talk about some issues that are relevant not just to student loans, but to governance in the United States and to what has been happening to our liberties as we've allowed politicians to work against our interests. One of the things that I did want to mention, we've got a young enterprising entrepreneur starting Calypso Salt and Soap. So don't forget, we've talked about that on the show several times in the past. We've had a whole show on it. But think about Calypso Salt and Soap.
Hello, my name is Taylor Ash, and I am
CalypsoSaltandSoap.com. And the Facebook page is Calypso Salt and Soap. Great products. Pirate Nation has donated an entire revamp of her website. So if you have a problem getting onto the website, CalypsoSaltandSoap.com, don't hesitate to go to her Facebook page and contact her there. Right? Great gifts. We've gotten to the end of September. Now we're getting into October. Got to start thinking about those gifts. CalypsoSaltandSoap.com. Maybe a good idea. Somebody that you know. I want to talk about the Citizens United case because there's a lot of confusion, a lot of PR, publicity, a number of petitions out there to repeal what the Supreme Court did. But if you look, if you investigate, if you read, if you find out about the history, and it's critical for you to understand the history, to learn the history, to know what's going on, okay? And to understand what's happening today, you can't understand it unless you understand the history. So you got to do a lot of reading. You got to do a lot of research. Don't let these 30-second or 3-second or however many second sound bites determine your opinion, because your opinion may be wrong. People are paying good money to get on the air to give you your opinion, to tell you what you might think. Politicians say one thing and do something else. That political class is a real problem, and we've got to deal with it if we're going to survive as a free nation. First, you need to know a little bit about me. I know Jorge has told you about himself, and Tracy has told you about herself, political perspectives, where they're coming from. I'm basically a libertarian. I'm reformed in some areas, but I'm basically a libertarian. Well, what is that? The bottom line is, he who governs least governs best. I want, to the maximum extent possible, the government out of my life. Right? The government has certain valid functions. Right? Those were enumerated in the Constitution. Right? I carry with me, and as you know, some of you may know, I taught constitutional law and a number of foundations of liberty and justice classes, so I always carry the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. I know you can't see that from here, but this is what this is, a booklet containing those things. Right? Important for you to know and to understand what our birthright is, what we were given, what the founders of this nation gave us. They gave us liberty. They gave us a market, a free market economic system. What were they giving us that stuff from? They were giving us that stuff from the domination of government, essentially from feudalism, from the serfdom of Europe. By the time it got to these shores, there had been changes. There have been rights that were established in various documents. But you need to read and understand the Constitution. And if you haven't looked at it for a while, there are plenty of places that you can get a copy of it. I want to talk to you a little bit about enumerated powers. The Constitution tells us and tells the government what it can and cannot do. It is enumerated, it is listed, it has numbered the items, the things that federal government is to get involved in. And federal government has exceeded those things grossly to the point that it's regulating every little bit of our lives, and thousands of regulations are developed every year. Congress is supposed to legislate, but Congress, to a certain degree, has abdicated its responsibilities. Congress is made up of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, over the last several years, the House of Representatives has passed hundreds of bills which have been blocked by the Senate because they've never come up on the floor, because the person that's running the Senate, Senator Reid, doesn't want them to come up on the floor. We are supposed to have budgets. We're supposed to operate under budgets, but budgets have not been passed. So we have these things called CRs, continuing resolutions, which basically are the compromises. We need to operate on budgets. Budgets tell the government what it can and cannot spend on. We don't know what we're spending. We're spending trillions of dollars more than we have. We've got nearly $18 trillion in debt. On top of that, we have somewhere in the neighborhood, at best estimate, $120 trillion in unfunded liabilities. What are unfunded liabilities? Well, they're the promises that have been made. Promises that have been made to senior citizens, Social Security, Medicare, etc. Those type of things. To the veterans. Through the Veterans Administration, they're supposed to be taken care of because of their service, because they served at relatively low wage rates. But they've got a need, they've got the possibility of being taken care of, and that's what they were promised, and they exchanged their labor on that basis. So let's look at Citizens United here. And there are lots of places that you can get the case, and there are lots of interesting commentaries on it. Essentially, it's a constitutional law case, and it was dealing with the regulation of campaign spending by organizations. The Supreme Court in 2010 held that the First Amendment prohibits the government from restricting independent political expenditures, that is, by non-politicians, by non-profit organizations. And the principles articulated by the Supreme Court in the case have also been extended to corporations, labor unions, and other associations. Well, an argument has been made that these are not real people. The problem is that in the law, in order for corporations and business entities to operate, they've got to be able to sue, they've got to be able to be sued, they've got to be able to make contracts, they've got to be able to do a whole lot of things that live people do. Now, corporations represent people. They have people leading them. They have people owning them. They have people working for them. The stocks that you have, that you own in your 401k, if you're fortunate to have one, or in your IRA, if you're fortunate to have one, or in lots of other places, if you are represented by a union, you may have a retirement fund of some sort. Most businesses have retirement funds now as opposed to pensions, but if you've got a pension plan, where do they put their money? They try to make money. They try to make money in the stock market. Well, what is the stock market? Each stock, each share is a piece of ownership in a corporation. And there's governance in corporations. And there's a whole set of corporate law regarding corporations, not just corporations, but also business associations of all kinds. They have reporting requirements. They have governance requirements. They're supposed to be responsive to their shareholders. They have annual meetings, usually. to be responsive to their shareholders. They have boards, governing boards, which are elected by their shareholders and can be held theoretically accountable, right, for their deeds. They have management, which is supposed to be responsive to those elected boards. So corporations have to do a whole lot of things that natural people do. And in order to be able to do those things, there's got to be an entree into the law that allows them to do those things. Well, the law includes a lot of things, including the First Amendment. The right to speak, the right to associate. So if you haven't looked at it in a while, let's take a look real quickly at what the First Amendment tells us. Right? Because the Constitution is our protection against the government. It is a document of limitation. The founders were very critical and felt a need to make sure the government was limited. The government was not allowed to run wild or to run free or to run roughshod over the people. That's why the revolution was fought. That's why various attempts at governance were developed. So the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So Congress shall make no law. Our federal government shall make no law. Well, here we have McCain-Feingold making a law. Congress is making a law. It's making a law to restrict speech. That's a violation of the First Amendment. How can they do that? And ultimately, the Supreme Court has found that they can't do that. The 2002 Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, which is known commonly as McCain-Feingold, overreached. Congress overreached. Now, Congress is constantly trying to overreach. They're constantly trying in these days to get control of the people. Right? Well, that's not their job. Congress's job is not to control the people. However, with our financing of congressional campaigns, with all the money that these people are able to make, they don't think of themselves as part of the people. They've stopped thinking of themselves, most of them, right, as members of the public. Instead, they think of themselves as a ruling elite, and that's precisely the opposite of what the Founding Fathers intended. Okay? And this Constitution, with these protections in it, says no. And the Supreme Court rightly says no. The First Amendment was vindicated by the Supreme Court in this decision. Okay? So, in this case, there was a conservative lobbying group called Citizens United. And they wanted to air a film that was critical of Hillary Clinton. Okay? And to advertise the film during television broadcasts, which timing-wise were in apparent violation of McCain-Feingold. And a specific section in that defined an electioneering communication as a broadcast, cable or satellite communication that mentioned a candidate within 60 days of a general election or 30 days of a primary and prohibited such expenditures by corporations and unions. So Congress was trying to prevent corporations and unions from talking within 60 days of an election. How would you like it if Congress put a gag on you and told you that you can't talk within 60 days of an election? Well, how do you campaign? How do you relate your interests? How do you discuss the issues? You can't discuss the issues if you're not allowed to get on the air, if you're not allowed to broadcast. Okay? That was the primary issue in this case. The district court for the District of Columbia held that McCain-Feingold applied and prohibited Citizens United from advertising the film or airing the film, broadcasting it, and they were not allowed to pay to have it shown on television within 30 days of the 2008 Democratic primaries. Well, the Supreme Court reversed that decision. They struck down those provisions of McCain-Feingold that prohibited corporations, including nonprofit corporations and unions, from making independent expenditures in electioneering communications. And they overruled a number of previous cases. Now, the case did not involve the federal ban on direct contributions from corporations or unions to candidate campaigns or political parties. Those remain illegal in races for federal office. So there's no money going from corporations and unions directly into campaigns. But if they have an independent point of view, they are allowed under this ruling, under Citizens United, to speak as any of us would be allowed to speak. Okay, well, there's a big difference between corporations and unions as opposed to us as individuals. Not everybody can come here to the studio and have a microphone and have a voice. That costs money. There's time that has to be paid for. There's services that have to be paid for. And corporations may, and unions may, be able to unfairly, some people think or say, unfairly accumulate lots of money and use that money to sway an election. Well, that denies the intelligence of the electorate. If you're seeing lots of campaign ads of the same type, which we're seeing these days, you need to think about, why are these people putting out the same stuff over and over and over again? Why are they using the same stuff? They're spending lots of money. Why are they doing that? What interest do they have that might be counter to my interests, to our interests as individuals, to our liberties? We do have a problem with corporations controlling what congressmen and senators do. And we need to change that. Changing this decision is not what's going to change that. It's a distraction. I argue that it's a distraction from the real issue. The real issue is that we've got to change what these politicians are doing. The founders never intended for politicians to be professional, to be full-time. They were to go to the sessions and go back home and go back to work at their businesses, at their jobs, earning their living. So politics, representation of the people, was seen to be a public service. And yet we don't have public servants today. We have professional politicians. People who deem it appropriate to pass laws and rules and regulations or allow agencies to regulate businesses. And they're able to trade inside with the knowledge that they have about what legislation is going to pass or not pass. They're making winners and losers. What companies are going to win and what companies are going to lose? Whose interests are going to be affected? They know that in advance. They know the votes that they're going to have before the bills come to the floor, and they can make bets. They place their bets. Where do they place their bets? They place their bets in the stock market. What stocks to buy and what stocks to get rid of before the law hits and takes effect. That's a huge deal because these people are becoming millionaires basically by insider trading. Their votes are deciding what companies' stocks are going to go up and what companies' stocks are going to go down, who can do business and who cannot do business. All right? So we've got a big problem here. Now, there are a bunch of people, that looked at it. I looked in and I pulled out a bunch of information, a bunch of stories statements by people about what this is. Nathan Persili talks about the floodgates were already open. The money was already in politics, and this changes very little about what happened the day before. Is not very much different from the day after Citizens United was decided and announced. John Dunbar talks about the Citizens United decision and why it matters, nonprofits or political parties. Okay. Many pundits, many bloggers, many professional people, many academicians praise the decision as a defense, as a vindication of free speech, of the First Amendment, of First Amendment rights. So this isn't what has been hurting people, but we have a number of Repeal Citizens United petitions out there. This one by Anthony Palak. I propose the following amendment to the United States Constitution, quote, any rights granted or otherwise provided for under the terms of this Constitution or its amendments shall be limited in application to natural persons only, except where expressly stated otherwise. Okay? So they're talking about express statement in the Constitution. Corporations, non-natural or fictitious business names, corporations, that's what they are. They're organized to be able to do business in the marketplace versus natural persons. Citizens United against Citizens United by Stephen Warris. And I hope I'm not pronouncing these names incorrectly. We are Citizens United against Citizens United, a decision that distorts democracy and erodes our freedoms. We want the court to be aware of the extent of public opposition to this ruling. Well, it's a petition. What is it doing? What good does it do? What value does it have? And it talks about distorting democracy and eroding our freedoms. What freedoms have been eroded? In fact, freedoms have been vindicated. The right to associate, the right to speak, support a constitutional amendment. Corporations are not people. In last year's Citizens United decision, the Supreme Court gave corporations the same First Amendment rights as people. Well, guess what? Corporations have had the same First Amendment rights as people because they are people. They are legal people. They're not natural people, but they are recognized as legal people. Our system would not work. Our businesses would not work. Right? We wouldn't have food in supermarkets if you couldn't incorporate, if you couldn't protect yourself, if you couldn't contract, if you couldn't do all the things that a person can do, that a natural person can do as a business. We're asking every state legislator in the country to support the most direct remedy we have left to correct the Supreme Court's awful Citizens United decision, a constitutional amendment clarifying that corporations are not people. I mean, basically, this is an attack on capitalism. But capitalism is our ability to raise funds. It's our ability to have an idea. Right? To have an idea like the idea we were just talking about, Calypso Salt and Soap, and to turn that into profit and to keep those profits. Right? And to advance our lives as a result of it, to provide for our well-being and our welfare and our provision. Right? All right. Here's another one. Put Citizens United. This is the longest one, and it's got the most, like about 250,000 people that have signed it. Put Citizens United in the dumpster of bad ideas. All right. So, to be delivered to the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and President Barack Obama. We, the undersigned, have had it. Corporations are not people. Elections should not be auctions, and we refuse to let our democracy be put up for sale. We are standing together to call for a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Okay? And it talks about the background. There's something like 250,000 signatures to this one. This is by Al Franken. So there are people there, if you look at the people that study these things, the academicians, the people that write about these things, most of them are saying Citizens United vindicated our First Amendment rights. And yet there's a group of people out there that are wanting to have Citizens United overturned. Why are we even talking about it? What's the issue? Right? The issue is that corporations can be treated like people. Well, they are treated like people. That hasn't changed anything. It's just recognized the fact. And more importantly, Citizens United recognize the fact that Congress shall make no law in this area regarding the First Amendment. All right, well, I see our time is just about up for tonight. Glad that you're listening and that you're watching. And hopefully we can talk more about this. If you got questions, get on the website, talk to us on the website. We are the people. Yeah.
Went to the Apollo.
You have been listening to We Are the People with social advocates Tracy Marks and Jorge Estamba, who every week bring to the light the needs and changes in our current system. Tune in every Monday night at 7 p.m. on wearethepeople.tv and participate in the conversation in the chat room or call 888-565-1470. Tune in next Monday for more information and facts. And Tracy and Jorge remind you to stay aware of your surroundings and challenges at all times.